6 pomegranate seeds rest in Persephone's palm, tiny blood red, glistening in the pale light of the underworld. She lifts one to her lips. She knows what eating means. The dead who consume the food of this realm can never fully leave. Hades watches from the shadows, barely breathing. The juice bursts against her tongue, sweet, sharp, binding. Above in the mortal world, her mother screams without knowing why. Was it hunger that broke her? Or something stranger? A choice made in the dark, far from her mother's eyes, entirely her own. 3,000 years later, we still argue about those 6 seeds. Did the god of death trick a girl? Or did a queen claim her throne? Tonight, we'll trace every step that led to that impossible moment. From a sunlit meadow to the land of the dead. And you can decide for yourself. Get comfortable now. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. This story has survived since before writing itself. Passed from voice to voice in firelit dark. If sleep finds you before the queen returns to daylight, that's as it should be. She rules the realm of rest, after all. Let her watch over you. Our story begins on the island of Sicily, in a meadow so beautiful that even the gods pause to admire it from above. Wildflowers carpeted every inch of that meadow at Enna. Narcissus white as bone, hyacinths deep as bruises, crocuses burning gold in the tall grass. Persephone came here every morning, bare feet on cool earth, hair loose, singing to no one. She was Demeter's daughter, goddess of spring before she knew what winter meant. Her mother Demeter had built this world for her. Every bloom selected, every breeze directed. A paradise designed to keep one daughter safe from every danger. But Demeter's love was heavy. Where other young goddesses roamed freely, Artemis hunting, Athena building, Persephone stayed in her garden, watched and guarded. The nymphs who played with her sensed it, something restless growing in Persephone's chest, a curiosity that flowers alone could never satisfy. Far below, in halls no sunlight ever reached, a different kind of loneliness festered. Hades sat on his obsidian throne and watched the living world through cracks in stone. He had won this kingdom by lot. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades drew the darkness. No god visited. No prayer reached him with warmth. Then one morning, through a fissure in the earth, Hades glimpsed a girl dancing among narcissus flowers. And the god of death, for the first time, felt something stir. He went to his brother Zeus with a question no one expected from the Lord of the dead. He asked for permission to love. Long before the pomegranate, before the darkness, there was only light. Persephone's world began in a meadow where nothing ever died. Demeter had carved this paradise from wild Sicilian hillside. Every petal answered to her. Every root grew exactly where she willed it. She had reason to be protective. Zeus, Persephone's father, had already proven that the powerful take what they desire. Demeter knew this firsthand. So she built walls of wind around the meadow. She planted guardians in every tree, nymphs who would sing if danger came. The perfect cage looks like paradise. Persephone grew inside that shelter like a vine reaching for sun it cannot find. Taller each season, more restless each morning. She learned the name of every flower by touch. She could coax blossoms from bare stone and make dead seeds remember how to grow. The nymphs adored her. They braided her hair with jasmine and told her stories of the world beyond, the oceans, the cities, the gods who walked among mortals. Those stories were kindling. Each one lit something behind Persephone's gray, green eyes, a hunger her mother's meadow could never feed. Demeter sensed the change. A mother always does. She held her daughter closer, planted new flowers, told her the world outside was cold and cruel. Everything you need is here, Demeter would say, gesturing at the endless blooms. And Persephone would nod, because arguing with a goddess of earth is like arguing with gravity. At night, Persephone lay awake counting stars through the canopy. Each constellation a map to somewhere else. Somewhere her mother's hands hadn't shaped. Meanwhile, on Olympus, the gods played their eternal games. Aphrodite stirred desire where it suited her. Ares sharpened his spear, and Zeus kept secrets from everyone. The secret Zeus kept was this: his brother Hades had asked for Persephone, and Zeus, who feared no one except possibly Demeter, had said yes without telling her. Hades had never asked for anything. In the centuries since the world was divided, he had governed the dead in silence. A solitary acting. The underworld ran with perfect justice under his hand. Every soul weighed, every shade placed. But justice is cold company when the halls echo only with the dead. Cerberus loved him. The three-headed hound would press all six eyes against Hades' knees, and the god would scratch behind each ear in turn, finding comfort in the only warmth he had. Then he saw her. Through that crack in the earth, a girl singing to narcissus flowers, and something cracked in him too. Something he thought the darkness had buried forever. Zeus agreed quickly, too quickly. Perhaps he saw advantage in binding the underworld to Olympus. Perhaps he simply didn't care enough to refuse. Neither brother consulted Demeter. Neither thought to ask Persephone. In the age of gods, daughters were currency, and fathers spent them freely. Hades prepared. He polished the chariot until it shone like black water. He groomed the 4 dark horses, Orphneus, Aethon, Nectaeus, Alastor, each one born from shadow. He planted a single narcissus at the meadow's edge, the most beautiful flower ever grown, with 100 blooms on one stem. A lure, a trap disguised as wonder. The morning came warm and ordinary. Persephone gathered her basket. The nymphs followed, chattering about nothing. Nobody felt the earth hold its breath. She noticed the narcissus from across the field. 100 blooms on a single stem. Impossible, radiant, pulling her gaze like a hand on her chin. Her companions called after her, but their voices grew faint. Each step toward the flower felt lighter, faster, as if the ground itself tilted her forward. She knelt before the flower. Its fragrance was unlike anything in her mother's garden. Deeper, stranger, with something dark beneath the sweetness, like honey over iron. Her fingers closed around the stem. She pulled. And the earth answered with a sound like the world breaking open. The ground tore apart beneath her feet. A chasm opened, a wound in the meadow, and from that darkness, the thunder of hooves shook the bones of the world. Hades erupted from the earth in his black chariot, armor gleaming, face set with terrible purpose. He reached for Persephone with one hand and seized her. She screamed. The sound split the sky. Nymphs scattered like birds from a hawk. Flowers for 100 yards wilted at the sound of her voice. The chariot plunged back into the earth. Darkness swallowed them both. Above, the chasm sealed itself shut. Meadow grass knitting closed like a wound healing wrong. In seconds, the meadow was whole again. Silent, empty. Only a crushed narcissus and a dropped basket marked the spot where a goddess had stood. Two heard that scream and understood it. Hecate, goddess of crossroads, felt it in her torch's flames. Helios, the all-seeing sun, watched the whole theft unfold. Neither spoke. Helios because the sun does not interfere with God's bargains. Hecate because she waited. She always waited, for the right crossroads. Demeter felt it as absence. A sudden cold in her chest where the warmth of her daughter had been. The wheat in her hand turned to dust. She ran. A goddess does not run. She moves the world to meet her. But Demeter ran, robes tearing on rocks, dignity abandoned to dread. The meadow offered nothing. Grass, flowers, silence. No crack in the earth, no chariot tracks, no daughter. Just a basket and a broken stem. She called Persephone's name until the mountains echoed it back. She tore flowers from the earth searching for a seam, a door, any sign of where the world had swallowed her child. The nymphs who had been Persephone's companions stood trembling at the meadow's edge. They knew something had happened. They had not been brave enough to stop it. Demeter cursed them. Her rage needed somewhere to land, and they were the closest living things. She turned them into sirens, half bird, half woman, and sent them screaming over the sea. Then Demeter lit 2 torches from Etna's volcanic fires. One for each hand. She would search every corner of the world. And she would not stop burning until she found her daughter. 9 days and 9 nights she searched without food. without rest, without the mercy of forgetting. And in her wake, the earth began to die. The Greeks who first told this story understood something we still feel, that the disappearance of a child leaves a wound in the world itself. For a people who lived and died by the harvest, winter was not just cold. It was the earth grieving. Every barren field was proof that a mother's love could shake the cosmos. They built their greatest mystery around this moment, the Eleusinian rites. For 2,000 years, initiates gathered to relive Demeter's search in torchlight processions through the night. What they saw inside was the best, kept secret in ancient history. Thousands of initiates over centuries, and not one ever revealed it. Some mysteries stay sacred because they must, but the story itself they shared freely. Every parent who feared losing a child, every child who yearned for freedom. They heard themselves in Persephone's myth. Down, down through the earth's layers Hades drove his chariot. Persephone's screams ricocheted off stone walls and returned to her as echoes of her own terror. The temperature dropped with every league. First the warmth left, then the color, then the smell of living things. All that remained was stone and silence and speed. Persephone fought. She clawed at Hades' arms, kicked against the chariot's frame, tore her own chiton trying to wrench free. He held her as gently as his grip allowed. The river Styx appeared below them, black water moving without current, without sound. On its banks, the dead stood watching with eyes that had forgotten surprise. The gates of the underworld opened without command, iron and obsidian doors swinging wide for their master. Cerberus lowered all three heads and whimpered in welcome. Hades brought the chariot to rest inside his palace. The silence after the hoofbeats was deafening. He turned to Persephone and spoke the first words she'd heard since sunlight. "You are not a prisoner." The words sounded absurd even to him. She stared at the god who had just torn her from the sky and said nothing at all. He showed her the palace. Halls of obsidian and silver. Gardens where gemstones grew like flowers. Diamond roses, sapphire hydrangeas. Ruby tulips that would never wilt. Persephone touched a diamond petal. It was cold. No texture, no give, no scent. Everything here was eternal and nothing here was alive. She understood the difference now. He offered her a throne. She refused. He offered food and wine. She refused. She would eat nothing, drink nothing, touch nothing that belonged to this realm. Days passed in the underworld, though day and night meant nothing here. Time was measured by the flow of the Styx and the arrival of new shades. Hades did not force himself on her. He did not rage or threaten. He sat in his hall and judged the dead and hoped that patience might become a language she could hear. She began to walk the halls alone. The shades parted for her like water around a stone, drawn to her living warmth. The only warm thing in the kingdom of the cold. A child's shade approached her. Small, translucent, confused. It had forgotten how to cry but remembered the shape of reaching for comfort. Persephone knelt. She held the shade. It passed through her arms like mist, but both of them pretended it didn't. Hades watched from his throne and felt something he had no name for. That was the moment something shifted. Not forgiveness, that would take years. Not love, that would take longer, but recognition. She saw what this place needed. Above, Demeter's search had become a catastrophe. 10 days without rest, and wherever she walked, the harvest failed. Grapevines withered on the hill, olive groves turned gray. Mortals began to pray, then beg, then scream. Their crops crumbled. Their animals starved. The goddess of plenty had become the goddess of nothing at all. She came to the city of Eleusis disguised as an old mortal woman. Bent, great-cloaked, grief-etching lines in an ageless face. She sat by a well and wept. The daughters of King Silius found her there. Kind girls raised to show hospitality to strangers. They brought her into their home and gave her a chair by the fire. Queen Metaneira asked the old woman to nurse her infant son, Demophon. Demeter held the baby and remembered what it felt like to cradle small life in her arms. Love made her reckless. She tried to make the mortal child immortal, holding him in divine fire each night, burning away his mortality piece by piece. Metanira walked in on the third night. She saw her son in flames and screamed. Demeter dropped the child and the disguise together, divine fury exploding outward. Fools! She thundered, her true form blazing like a sun in the small mortal house. I would have made your son eternal. Now he will grow old and die like all of you. She demanded they build her a temple. On the hill above Eleusis, a place where she could sit in her sorrow and wait for the world to force Zeus's hand. Inside her temple, Demeter sealed herself away. She stopped every seed from sprouting, every fruit from ripening, every flower from opening. The world turned to ash and dust. Famine spread like plague. Children cried with swollen bellies. Old men chewed bark. The altars of every god went cold, because no mortal had grain to spare for offerings. Now the gods panicked. Without mortal worship, divine power flickered. Without offerings, ambrosia lost its sweetness. Demeter's grief threatened every throne on Olympus. Iris, rainbow messenger, came to Demeter's temple with Zeus's command, enough. Release the earth. Demeter didn't even look up. Give me my daughter. God after god made the journey to Eleusis. Each offered gifts, promised honors, begged her to relent. Demeter gave them all the same, answered. The earth stays dead until Persephone comes home. Zeus had no choice. The lord of sky and thunder bent before a mother's love. He summoned Hermes and gave him the only order that could save the world: go to the underworld. Hermes descended through the earth like a needle through cloth, swift, bright, leaving a thread of golden light in his wake. The underworld had never seen anything so fast. Cerberus raised all three heads at the messenger's approach. One growled, one sniffed, one whimpered. Hermes tossed him a honey cake without breaking stride. The halls of Hades opened before him, silver rivers flowing through obsidian corridors, phosphorescent light pulsing in the walls like a slow heartbeat. Beautiful in the way grief can be beautiful. He found them in the throne room, not as he expected. Hades on his obsidian seat, yes. But Persephone was not cowering. She was standing before a line of shades, listening. A shade knelt before her, an old woman, translucent, trembling. Persephone touched her forehead and whispered something. The shade's face softened. She drifted away in peace. Hermes had carried messages between every realm. He had seen gods rage and mortals weep. But he had never seen a living goddess tend the dead with such tenderness. Hades rose when he saw the messenger. His face betrayed nothing, but his hand gripped the armrest of his throne until the obsidian cracked. Zeus commands her return. Hermes kept his voice neutral. The messenger knows better than to take sides between gods. Demeter has stopped the world from growing. Persephone turned. For the first time in weeks, the word mother crossed her face, not spoken, but visible. A flash of longing so sharp it cut through the underworld's cold. Hades did not argue with Zeus's command. The god of the dead understood inevitability better than anyone. What must happen, happens. But he had one last move. Before you leave, he said to Persephone, his voice steady as stone, let me offer you one kindness. You haven't eaten in all these days. You must be starving. The pomegranate lay split on a silver plate. Its seeds glistened like tiny rubies, each one a jewel, each one a chain. The most beautiful prison ever designed. Did Persephone know? Scholars have debated this for 3 millennia. Did she understand that food of the dead binds the living? Or was hunger simply stronger than caution? Here is what I believe, and you're welcome to disagree. She knew. Look at who she'd become in those weeks underground. A woman who comforted the dead does not act from ignorance. 6 seeds. Not the whole fruit, just 6 small seeds. Enough to bind her, not enough to keep her forever. A compromise written in juice and swallowed in silence. Hermes saw and understood immediately. His wings drooped. The mathematics of divine law were simple. 6 seeds, 6 months bound to the dead. No god could undo a meal willingly taken. Hades said nothing. His face was a mask, but deep in his eyes, the eyes that had watched centuries of death, something fragile and terrified dared to hope. Persephone wiped pomegranate juice from her lips. She looked at Hades, then at Hermes, then toward the ceiling, toward the sky. She couldn't see but could still feel pulling her upward. "Take me to my mother," she said. And her voice had changed. Not the frightened girl's cry from the chariot, but something lower, steadier. A queen making a request, not a plea. Hermes led the way upward. Persephone followed. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at Hades one last time. No one knows what passed between them in that glance. The ascent began. Stone gave way to roots, roots to soil, soil to the first pale tendrils of light. Persephone climbed toward the sun with pomegranate still sweet on her tongue. With each step upward, something miraculous happened beneath her feet. Flowers pushed through the dead earth. Crocuses first, then violets, then wild roses. Spring followed her like a shadow. The surface came suddenly. A burst of light so fierce it brought tears. She shielded her eyes with both hands. The sun was an assault after weeks of phosphorescent dark. Demeter was already running. She had felt the earth shift, a mother's sense sharper than any oracle. She ran from her temple with her robes tearing, and her torches still burning. They saw each other across a barren field. Two figures, one golden, one pale, and the space between them crackled with 9 days of grief compressed into one moment of recognition. Demeter's torches fell. Persephone's dignity fell. They ran to each other like the world depended on their meeting. And in a way it did. The embrace shook the earth. Literally. Where Demeter's tears fell, grass erupted. Where their arms entwined, trees burst from bare soil in seconds, fully grown and flowering. For a long time, neither spoke. Words seemed crude after such absence. They held each other and breathed, and the world remembered what green looked like. Then Demeter pulled back and looked at her daughter's face. And she saw it. Something different behind the familiar eyes. Persephone had gone into the earth a girl. She had not returned as one. "What did he do to you?" Demeter's voice cracked between fury and tenderness. Persephone's answer was quieter than the question deserved. "He showed me what he had," which was very little. The confession came next. 6 seeds. Pomegranate. Demeter's face collapsed like a temple in an earthquake, stone by stone, feature by feature, falling inward. 6 seeds meant 6 months below. The law was ancient, older than Zeus, older than the Titans. What the dead realm feeds you, the dead realm owns. Demeter screamed at the sky. She cursed Zeus, cursed Hades, cursed every god who had watched and done nothing. The newly grown trees bent away from her fury. Zeus intervened before the world could break again. He appeared in a column of light, thunderbolt raised not in threat but in truce. Even the king of gods looked tired. The compromise took shape like a blade being forged, hammered between Demeter's grief and the underworld's law. 6 months above, 6 months below. The world split between a mother and a husband. Nobody asked Persephone what she wanted. Not once. The gods decided her fate in the third person, while she stood 5 feet away, pomegranate still on her breath. She accepted it. What choice did she have? But acceptance and surrender are different animals, and the gods didn't notice which one stood behind her eyes. And so the first spring after the long darkness came not with a calendar's turning, but with a daughter's footsteps. Persephone walked the mortal earth, and the world exhaled. Farmers wept in their fields. Children ran outside for the first time in months. Lambs were born overnight. Every bud that opened was a small hallelujah the earth sang to itself. Demeter held those 6 months like stolen treasure. Every day precious, every sunset a small death. She watched Persephone with the ferocity of someone counting what they cannot keep. Persephone bloomed in the sun. She walked the fields, grew the harvests, danced in meadows that remembered her. But something in her kept glancing at shadows, as if expecting to find doorways. She dreamed of the underworld, the child shade, the gemstone gardens, the silver rivers running through dark halls. She dreamed of a throne waiting empty beside another throne. The 6th month arrived as months always do, too fast when you're dreading them. Autumn crept across the meadow. Leaves turned copper, the air thinned. Demeter held on as long as the law allowed. When the final day came, she embraced her daughter at the meadow's edge and whispered, "I will bring you back. I promise!" Persephone stepped into the crack that opened in the earth. She didn't look back this time. Not because she didn't love her mother, but because looking back would make it impossible. Above, the first frost formed on Demeter's cheeks. Below, the first warmth returned to the halls of the dead. Two worlds breathing in opposite rhythm, one exhaling as the other inhaled. Hades waited at the bottom of the stairs. He did not reach for her. He simply stood, patient as only the god of eternity can be, and let her come to him. She walked past him to the throne room, past the gemstone garden, past the silver rivers, straight to the line of waiting shades. She sat on her throne and began. The dead had missed her. They gathered like cold hands around a fire, pressing close, reaching for the living warmth that only Persephone carried into the land of endings. The storytellers who shaped this myth lived in a world where death was close as the next failed harvest, the next winter storm, the next war that emptied a village of its young men. They needed death to mean something. Not punishment, not oblivion, but a place. A realm with rules, with a queen who cared, with the promise that even in darkness, someone was tending the lost. Persephone gave them that promise. A goddess of life choosing to reign in death. It meant the boundary between worlds was not a wall but a door, and doors open both ways. Every autumn, when the Greeks saw the leaves fall, they did not only mourn. They knew Persephone was going where she was needed. Even the dead deserve a queen who chose to love them. That faith was so powerful that the Eleusinian mysteries, those torchlit ceremonies reenacting Demeter's search, became the most sacred rites in the ancient world. For 2,000 years, they offered the living a taste of what lay beyond. Spring returned as promised. Persephone emerged from the earth and the world gasped green. Demeter's joy made flowers bloom so thick the bees grew drunk on nectar. Each return changed her a little more. The first year she wept on leaving. The second year she sighed. By the third, she walked between worlds like someone checking two homes. Hades learned to wait without despair. He governed the dead, maintained his justice, and kept her throne polished. When she returned each autumn, the halls brightened before she even arrived. Together they reshaped the underworld. Persephone insisted the child shades be gathered in gardens of asphodel, where gentle light fell. Hades agreed before she finished asking. She created the fields of Elysium for the honored dead, a paradise underground to mirror her mother's meadow above. If the dead must stay, let them stay in beauty. The Erinyes, the Furies who punished oathbreakers, answered to Persephone alone. Three ancient spirits of vengeance bowed to the queen who understood both mercy and wrath. Heroes who descended to the underworld found her there. Orpheus begging for his wife, Heracles on his labors, Theseus on his foolish quest. Each one met the queen, not the maiden. When Orpheus played for Eurydice's release, it was Persephone who wept first. She who knew what it meant to be torn from love ordered the shade released. Even Hades could not refuse her tears. With each passing age, the balance deepened. Persephone was no longer divided between two worlds. She was the bridge connecting them, the hinge on which death and life swung open. Demeter never fully accepted it. Every autumn she grieved anew, but her grief became the world's rhythm, not a punishment but a pulse. Without winter, the Greeks knew spring means nothing. Think about that for a moment. An entire civilization looked at bare trees and frozen ground and saw not emptiness, but a love story. Every winter was evidence that someone's mother missed them that much. The seasons turned. Years became decades, became centuries. And every spring, Persephone climbed through the earth, and every autumn, she descended. The cycle held. But something was growing in Persephone that neither Demeter nor Hades had predicted. Power. Not borrowed power, not granted, but her own, forged in the space between two worlds. She began to make decisions without consulting either realm. When a mortal hero disrespected the dead, she punished him. When Hades judged too harshly, she softened the sentence. The other gods noticed. Persephone was no longer Demeter's sheltered daughter or Hades' reluctant bride. She was something new, a goddess who had been broken and had set her own bones. Even Zeus stepped carefully around her now. The daughter he'd traded away had become the most strategically positioned god in the cosmos. With one foot in life and one in death, Hecate became her closest companion. The three faced goddess of crossroads and the queen of transitions. They understood each other. Both lived in the spaces between things. Persephone's relationship with Hades deepened in ways the original myth barely hints at. They governed together. Not ruler and consort, but two equal sovereigns of the same strange kingdom. He showed her the parts of his kingdom he'd never shown anyone. The river of memory, Leth, where shades could choose to forget their mortal pain before passing on. She showed him tenderness the underworld had never known. She sang to the rivers and they flowed faster. She planted living seeds in dead soil. And somehow, some of them grew. Asphodel bloomed in the throne room. Gray flowers with silver stems, not alive exactly, not dead exactly. Something in between, like everything in Persephone's world now. Years folded into each other. The rhythm held. But Demeter's grief never fully healed. It simply became something she carried, like a stone in her chest that she'd learned to breathe around. She poured that grief into the earth, every spring more extravagant than the last. As if each reunion was a celebration, she needed to be louder, more vivid, more desperately alive. The mortals understood. Their spring festivals grew wilder, dancing, drinking, planting by torchlight. They celebrated Persephone's return with the same relief her mother felt. And in autumn, they held quieter rites. They left pomegranates at crossroads for Persephone's journey. They lit 2 torches for Demeter. They whispered prayers to the dark below. The cycle was sacred. It was the world's heartbeat. Spring the inhale, autumn the exhale. And between them a goddess moving through the earth, like blood through a body. But even sacred things can be threatened. Even the oldest rhythms can break. And the story of Persephone's greatest trial has never been the abduction. It was what came after. A mortal king named Pirithous, drunk on his own legend, bloated with arrogance, decided he deserved a goddess for a wife. He chose Persephone. He dragged his friend Theseus into the plot. Together they descended to the underworld uninvited. 2 mortals walking into Death's house and demanding his wife. Hades did not rage, he smiled. The god of death offered them chairs, wine, hospitality. Please, he said, sit. And they sat, and could never rise again. The chairs of forgetfulness held them fast, stone growing over their limbs, their memories fading, their mortal bodies becoming part of the underworld's architecture. Persephone watched from her throne. She did not intervene. She did not plead mercy. A man came to claim her like property, and the queen let the underworld answer. Later, Heracles came for Theseus, a legitimate hero on a legitimate quest. Persephone judged the case. Theseus had been a fool, not a villain. She allowed his release. Pirithous stayed. He stays still, if the myths hold true. Fused to his chair at the bottom of the world, the man who thought a queen could be taken, she could not. This was the Persephone the ancient world truly feared and honored. Not the girl in the meadow, the woman on the throne. Not the stolen bride, the chosen queen. Demeter herself had to accept what her daughter had become. The girl she'd caged in flowers now commanded the Furies, judged heroes, and held dominion over every soul that ever lived and died. And here is the moment that shakes the foundation of every realm. Demeter, in her fury over the arrangement she cannot change, makes good on her darkest threat. She withdraws her blessing entirely. Not partially, not seasonally, completely. Every living plant on earth begins to die. Seeds turn to stone in the soil. Roots forget how to drink. Humanity stands at the edge of extinction. Not from flood or fire, from silence. The quiet catastrophe of a world where nothing grows. Babies cry. Adults stop trying to comfort them. The gods of Olympus begin to fade. Without worship, without offerings, without the burning fat of sacrifice. Their power gutters like candles in a sealed room. Even Zeus feels the darkness close in. One mother's love. That is what nearly ended the world. Not a titan's wrath or a monster's hunger. A mother who would burn everything rather than live without her child. And the gods blinked first. The compromise held barely. Zeus enforced it with the last authority he could muster. 6 months of sun. 6 months of shadow. The world would survive on half a goddess's love. But Demeter's near. Destruction of everything had changed the power dynamics on Olympus forever. No god would forget that a mother almost ended the world, and Zeus had been powerless to stop her. Persephone felt the tremors of that confrontation from below. The underworld had shaken when her mother threatened creation. Even the dead had looked up, sensing that annihilation might reach them too. She realized something that cold night on her throne. She was the only thing preventing the apocalypse. Not Zeus with his lightning. Not Hades with his gates. Her, the fulcrum, the hinge. If she refused to return above, Demeter would destroy the surface. If she refused to descend below, the dead would have no queen and the living no winter. The world needed her to keep walking between. That responsibility could have crushed her. Instead, she straightened on her throne and began to plan. A girl would have wept. A queen builds. She sent word to her mother through Hecate. Not a plea, not a command, but an invitation. Come see what I've built. Come see why I stay. Demeter had never been invited to the underworld before. Demeter descended. The goddess of growing things walked into the land of endings for the first time. And what she found there was not what she had imagined for 9 agonizing days. Silver rivers flowing through halls of dark stone. Gardens of asphodel where child shades played in gentle light. The Furies standing guard not with menace but with purpose. Order, not cruelty. Persephone met her at the throne room doors. Not in the white chiton of the meadow. In midnight robes, iron flowers in her hair, carrying authority like a second skin. You made this? Demeter whispered, looking at the asphodel gardens, the organized halls, the shades who moved with something like peace rather than despair. I made this. Persephone's voice held no apology. They needed someone. The dead arrive frightened, confused, grieving everything they've lost. Someone had to care. Not the furious tears of a wronged mother. Quieter tears. The kind that come when you realize your child has become someone you didn't teach them to be. And that person is magnificent. Hades stood at a distance, watching the reunion. He understood something about mothers and daughters, that the bond outlasts even death. His realm was built on that truth. Demeter left the underworld changed. She did not stop grieving. She would never stop grieving. But she stopped believing her daughter was suffering. That made the winters gentler. But peace among gods is always temporary. A new threat gathered, not from Olympus or the underworld, but from the space between. Something older than the gods themselves stirred. The Titans, imprisoned beneath the earth since Zeus defeated them, had been listening. Demeter's earthquake of grief had cracked their prison walls, and through those cracks they began to whisper. Persephone heard them first. Sitting on her throne in the deep hours, she felt vibrations in the stone, rhythmic, purposeful, like a heartbeat waking after an age of stillness. She pressed her palm to the obsidian floor. The stone was warm. It had never been warm. Something massive was breathing beneath her kingdom, and it was waking up. Hades felt it too. He met Persephone's eyes across the throne room. And for the first time she saw genuine fear in the god, who had watched millennia of death without flinching. Kronos, he said. One word. The name of his father, the Titan who ate his own children, who Zeus had overthrown, who was supposed to sleep forever in chains of divine bronze. The chains were weakening. Demeter's rage had shaken foundations no one had thought about for millennia. Each link of divine bronze showed hairline fractures, glowing amber where they cracked. Persephone understood the mathematics of catastrophe instantly. If Kronos broke free beneath the underworld, the dead would be unmade. The gates would shatter. Death itself would die. She could have sent for Zeus. She could have waited for Olympus to convene, debate, and send a committee. Instead, the queen of the dead walked toward the sound of her grandfather waking. Hades caught her arm. "You cannot face a Titan alone." She looked at his hand on her arm, the same grip from the chariot, and gently removed it. "I'm not alone. I have the dead." She descended further than any god had gone since the war with the Titans. The corridors narrowed, the heat rose, and the whispers became a voice. Ancient, enormous, hungry. She found him. Kronos, the father of gods, the swallower of children, chained to the roots of the world. Even diminished, even imprisoned, he was vast. His eye alone was larger than her throne room. The Titan's voice rolled through the chamber like an earthquake speaking. "Granddaughter, you smell of both worlds. Come closer. I have not tasted anything fresh in an age." She did not flee. She did not call for help. The girl who once screamed when torn from a meadow stood before the most terrifying being in existence and spoke 3 words. "Go back to sleep." What happened next would become the secret heart of Persephone's myth. A battle fought not with weapons, but with the only power that could bind a Titan, the authority of someone who belongs to life and death equally. Kronos laughed. The sound shook loose boulders the size of temples. A Titan's laughter is not amusement. It is the earth mocking everything built upon it. Go back to sleep. The Titan's amber eye narrowed with ancient contempt. "Little flower goddess, I ate gods stronger than you before the world had oceans." Persephone felt her power measured against his and found it wanting. Spring cannot fight the primordial. Death cannot threaten what existed before death was born. She needed something else. She remembered her mother. Not the goddess, the woman. How Demeter's love had nearly ended everything. How the most destructive force in creation was not power, but devotion without limit. She remembered Hades. Not the abductor, the lonely god who polished a throne for someone who might never sit in it. Patient, atching, hoping against the logic of eternity. She remembered herself. The girl in the meadow who longed for more. The prisoner who comforted a child's shade. The queen who chose to eat 6 seeds. Every version of her was still here. She did not attack the Titan. She sat down, cross-legged on the stone floor of his prison, small as a seed before a mountain, and she began to speak. "You ate your children," she said. Not an accusation, a fact spoken with the quiet authority of someone who judges the dead. "You swallowed them whole because you feared what they'd become." The Titan stopped laughing. Something flickered in that enormous amber eye, not fear, not rage, but recognition, the deepest wound, touched by the smallest hand. "I know what that fear feels like." Persephone continued. "My mother built a cage of flowers around me for the same reason. Love that devours, protection that destroys. I inherited it from you." Kronos' chains creaked. Not from strain, from something stranger. The Titan was shifting, leaning closer, lowering his immense face toward the impossible granddaughter who spoke to him like a person. "Your children rule the world now," she told him. "Zeus has the sky. Poseidon has the sea, Hades. Your quiet son has death. And Demeter grows everything that lives. They turned out remarkable. You ate them because a prophecy said they'd overthrow you. And they did. The prophecy was right. But prophecies never tell you what comes after the overthrow." Silence filled the cavern. Not the hollow silence of empty places, but the heavy silence of something enormous thinking for the first time in millennia. Persephone reached into her robes and pulled out a pomegranate. Not an underworld fruit, a living one from Demeter's own orchards. She held it up to the Titan. "From your daughter's garden, she grew this. Demeter, the one you swallowed third, she makes the world bloom." Persephone split the fruit open. Seeds glistened like promises. A sound came from Kronos that shook the foundations differently. Not laughter, not speech. Something between a groan and a sigh. The sound of a being older than grief finally feeling it. The chains stopped cracking. Not because they grew stronger, because the force pulling against them eased. The rage that had been building for millennia began, slowly, to subside. Persephone placed the split pomegranate on the stone floor between them, an offering to a grandfather she had never met. From a granddaughter who understood prisons better than most. She sang then, a song her mother had sung to her in the meadow, ancient even by divine standards, a lullaby older than language. The melody drifted upward like warm smoke. Kronos closed his eye. The amber glowed dim to ember, then to shadow. His breathing slowed, slower, until it matched the rhythm of the earth's own turning. He slept. Not the restless sleep of a prisoner plotting escape. True sleep. The kind that comes when something you've carried for ages is finally set down. Even titans can be exhausted by their own rage. Persephone rose. Her legs trembled. She had spent more power than she knew she had. The pomegranate on the floor was gone. Only red stains on the stone, like a memory of sweetness. She climbed back toward her kingdom, each step heavier than the last. The shades who had followed her parted as she passed, their translucent faces holding something new, reverence. Hades met her at the passage's mouth. He said nothing. He simply offered his arm, and for the first time, she took it. Not because she needed support, but because she chose to accept it. The underworld was still. The tremors had stopped. The rivers flowed silver again. Cerberus curled at the gate, all three heads resting. The crisis had passed like a fever breaking. Persephone sat on her throne and felt the weight of it differently now. Not a sentence, not a duty, a choice confirmed. She chose this place. She chose these people. She chose this dark. Word of what she'd done filtered upward. Hermes carried it, as he carried everything. By the time the story reached Olympus, it had already become legend. Zeus heard and was silent. His daughter had done what he could not. Faced the father he'd overthrown, and offered not a weapon, but a fruit from his sister's garden. The irony was not lost on him. Demeter heard and wept, but differently this time. Her daughter had taken Demeter's own love, her own consuming devotion, and weaponized it into compassion. The apple had not fallen far from the tree. The seasons continued to turn. Spring came and went. Autumn followed. But now when Persephone descended, even Demeter understood that her daughter was not being taken. She was going home. 2 thrones, 2 loves. Each fierce, each valid, each demanding everything. Persephone carried them both without choosing between them, and the world turned on that balance. She grew flowers in the underworld that existed nowhere else. Night, blooming jasmine that glowed silver, black roses that smelled of warm earth, asphodel that sang when touched. She established rituals for the newly dead, gentler transitions, guided passages, a moment of warmth before the long cold. The underworld had been efficient. She made it kind. Hades watched his kingdom transform and offered no resistance. He had governed the dead with justice. Persephone added something justice alone cannot provide: tenderness. They ruled as equals. When a shade's case was complex, they debated. When a hero petitioned for passage, they decided together. 2 perspectives, life and death, meeting in every verdict. The relationship between them had become something the myths struggle to describe. Not the violence of the abduction, not the romance mortals project onto gods, but partnership forged in darkness. She had learned to love the dark, not despite what it had done to her, but through it. The way a broken bone heals stronger, the way pressed coal becomes diamond. And the dark had learned to love her. Every phosphorescent stone in the underworld glowed brighter when she was near. The rivers sang. Even Cerberus learned to purr, all 3 heads at once. The poet who first gave this story shape lived in a world without books. Homer, or whoever carried his name, wove Persephone into verses that were memorized, never written. Breath was the first library. The Homeric hymn to Demeter, composed around 600 BCE, became the definitive version. But every village had its own Persephone. Some said she went willingly. Some said she fought. Some said she conquered. The Romans adopted her as Proserpina and softened the story. Medieval monks preserved the text, but worried about the pagan goddess. The Renaissance painters made her beautiful and passive, which she never was. Each retelling revealed more about the tellers than the myth. When a culture needed a victim, she was victimized. When it needed a hero, she heroized. Persephone became a mirror 3,000 years wide. But the core survived every adaptation. A daughter taken from her mother. A mother who broke the world to get her back. And a woman who made a kingdom in the dark. Some stories are too true to distort. Back in the realm of gods, the seasons had settled into their eternal dance. But Persephone's power continued to grow with each descent and each return. Each crossing strengthened her. She became the goddess mortals prayed to at transitions, birth, marriage, death. Every threshold belonged to her. Every moment of becoming was her domain. The Eleusinian initiates understood this. They walked in torchlight reenacting the myth, not for entertainment, but for transformation. They entered as one person. They emerged as another. Persephone's myth taught them the most radical idea in ancient religion: death is not an ending. It is a descent, painful, dark, terrifying. But there is a queen waiting at the bottom, and she is kind. That idea echoed forward through time. When later religions promised life after death, they were walking a road Persephone had paved. The first queen of the dead was also the first promise of return. But even promises have their darkest hour. And Persephone's was coming. The moment that would test everything she had built, everything she had become. A sickness crept through the underworld. Not disease, but something worse. The shades began to lose their memories faster. Newly arrived souls couldn't remember their own names. The river Litha, meant to ease suffering through chosen forgetting, was overflowing its banks. Its waters of oblivion seeped into every corridor, every garden, every hall. Hades tried to contain it. He redirected rivers, built barriers of stone. But Lethe is not just water. It is the principle of forgetting, and principles cannot be damned. Persephone recognized the symptom. Kronos' waking had cracked more than chains. It had fractured the deepest structures of the underworld. The river of forgetting was healing the wound by erasing everything. If Lethe consumed the underworld, the dead would become nothing. Not tortured, not peaceful, just blank. And a death without memory is not an afterlife, it is annihilation. Persephone called the Furies. She summoned Hecate. She sent Hermes to Olympus and Demeter both. For the first time, she was not facing a crisis alone. She was commanding a response. She needed her mother's power. Spring was memory. Every flower a record of the one before it. Every seed carrying the knowledge of what it would become. Memory and growth were the same thing. Demeter came without hesitation. The goddess of harvest descended into Death's kingdom for the second time. And this time she brought her full power. Weed in one hand, torch in the other. Mother and daughter stood together at the Litha's edge. Gold light and silver, dark light. Growth and death. Memory and eternity. For once, perfectly aligned. Persephone planted a seed in the Litha's water. A pomegranate seed. The same fruit that had bound her to this place. Demeter poured her power into it. The seed should not have grown. Nothing grows in the water of forgetting. That is its nature. But this seed carried two powers at once. The memory of life and the acceptance of death. A pomegranate tree erupted from the flood. Not the underworld's ghostly fruit. A living tree. Roots drinking the Letha's waters and transforming oblivion into growth. Memory made physical. Fruit formed on the branches. Red as the seeds that had bound Persephone. Bright as the fire Demeter had carried. Each pomegranate contained not forgetting but remembering. The Letha retreated. Not vanquished, the river of forgetting will always exist, but returned to its banks, its purpose restored. Forgetting is mercy, oblivion is destruction. The tree knew the difference. The shades regained themselves. Names returned to lips. Memories surfaced like fish in clearing water. A grandmother remembered her granddaughter's laugh. A soldier remembered the sun. Demeter and Persephone stood beneath the pomegranate tree they'd grown together. The fruit that had once divided them now united them. Mother and daughter, creating in the land of endings, Hades approached the tree and touched its bark. It was warm, alive, real. In his kingdom of death, something genuinely lived. He pressed his forehead against it and said nothing. Demeter stayed in the underworld 3 days. She walked with Persephone through every hall, met every shade her daughter cared for, saw every flower her daughter had coaxed from stone. When she left, she did not weep. She climbed toward the surface, and the wheat fields were already golden, responding to her happiness rather than her grief. The world had never seen such a harvest. The seasons deepened in beauty after that. Springs were more vivid. Autumns were more gentle. Even the winters softened, as if Demeter had finally made peace with the dark months. Persephone noticed the change. The world above responded to the world below, and vice versa. She was not just the bridge between them. She was the current that made both flow. She began to understand her own myth from the inside. She was not the victim of the story. She was not even the hero. She was the transformation itself, the process by which innocence becomes wisdom. The nymphs her mother had cursed into sirens still sang over the sea. Persephone heard them sometimes, their voices carrying down through rock and water. They sang of the meadow. They sang of her. She sent them a message through Hermes. She forgave her mother's curse on their behalf. She could not undo it, but she could ensure they were remembered as friends, not monsters. Years became centuries. The gods settled into their eternities. Olympus played its games. The underworld kept its solemn peace. And Persephone walked between them, carrying spring in one hand and starlight in the other. Mortals told her story every harvest season. They painted her on vases. The girl in the meadow, the queen on the throne, the woman between worlds. Each image a prayer, each prayer a seed. The mystery cults grew. Thousands came to Eleusis every autumn. Kings and slaves together, equal before the mystery. What they experienced underground changed them forever. Nobody ever betrayed the secret. Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, would later say that Athens had given the world many gifts, but the mysteries at Eleusis were the greatest, because they taught mortals how to die without fear. To die without fear. That was Persephone's gift. Not immortality, something better. The knowledge that death has a queen who chose to be there, and she is waiting with open arms. 3,000 years after the first poet sang of Persephone, she walks through every culture we've built. Carl Jung called her an archetype, the eternal daughter who becomes the sovereign self. Modern women found something fierce in her story. Not a victim rescued by male heroes. A woman who faced her darkest moment and built an empire in it. Persephone as feminist icon was always there. We just had to look. Every story of death and rebirth echoes her. The hero's journey, descent into darkness, transformation, return, is Persephone's myth wearing different masks. She was the template. In therapy rooms today, her myth is used to understand grief, transition, and the courage it takes to build a new identity when the old one is torn away. Her story heals because it is honest about pain. We still eat pomegranates. We still plant seeds in autumn knowing they'll sleep through winter and wake in spring. Whether we know it or not, we're following Persephone's rhythm every time we trust that what's buried will rise. Now the great wheel of Persephone's myth turns toward its final revolution. The moment she has been building toward across every descent and every return. The choice that defines everything. It is autumn. The leaves fall. Demeter prepares her grief like an old coat she puts on every year, familiar, heavy, necessary. She waits for her daughter to descend as she always does. But this year, Persephone does not wait to be summoned by the calendar. She does not wait for the earth to crack open. She walks to the meadow's edge and stands before her mother. "Mother," she says, and her voice holds 3,000 years of love and 3,000 years of becoming. "I need you to understand something." Demeter's hands tighten on her sheaves. She knows what's coming. Mothers always know. The moment their child stops needing permission and starts giving notice. I am going below. Not because the law demands it. Not because Hades expects it. Because the dead need me and I choose to answer. This is who I am now. Demeter does not scream. She does not threaten famine. She has spent centuries learning this moment, and when it arrives, she meets it with the dignity of a goddess who has survived her own worst impulses. She pulls her daughter close. One embrace, fierce and final and full of every meadow they ever shared. Then she lets go. The harvest goddess releases her only crop. Persephone turns toward the dark. The earth opens, not violently this time, not as a wound, but as a door. A door she has earned, a door that was always hers. She descends. Not falling, not being dragged, not running from grief. Walking. Each step deliberate, each step a statement: I choose this darkness. I choose these people. I choose myself. Behind her, the meadow flowers bloom one final time in farewell. Persephone's spring is not ending. It is going underground, where it is needed more. At the bottom of the stairs, the entire underworld waits. Every shade, every river, every stone. Hades stands before his throne, their throne, and does not move. He has learned that the most powerful thing he can do is wait. Persephone steps into the throne room. The shades part like water. Her iron crown materializes from shadow, the underworld itself dressing its queen. She has never looked more powerful. She takes her seat, not beside Hades, not below him, on her own throne, equal and earned. The obsidian seat that once felt like a prison now fits her exactly. It always did. She just had to grow into it. The shades surge forward, not in demand but in welcome. A child shade reaches for her hand. She takes it. A warrior shade kneels. She nods. A grandmother shade weeps without tears. Persephone weeps for her. The girl who was stolen has become the queen who chooses. And in that choice, free, clear, unforced, Persephone completes the oldest transformation in mythology. She is no one's victim. She is everyone's guide through the dark. So what does this story mean? This ancient, tangled, beautiful myth that has outlived every empire that told it. Let the answer come gently, like sleep approaching. The pomegranate is the oldest symbol in this myth, and the most honest. Every choice binds us. Every bite of life comes with a cost. But binding is not the same as trapping. We all eat the pomegranate eventually. We all make choices that tie us to places, to people, to versions of ourselves we didn't plan on becoming. That is not defeat, that is living. The seasons are the myth's most visible gift to the world. The Greeks looked at winter and chose not to see emptiness. They saw a mother's grief and found it beautiful because it was love. Every spring is a reunion. Every autumn is a farewell. And in between, the world does what the world always does: grows, loves, grieves, begins again. The cycle is the comfort. Demeter teaches us that love is not gentle. It is the most dangerous force in existence, capable of ending worlds, withering harvests, bringing gods to their knees. And it is still worth feeling. Hades teaches us that loneliness does not make you evil, but it can make you desperate. And that the difference between a kidnapper and a lover is whether you learn to let go. And Persephone, she teaches us the thing we need most in the dark hours, that what is taken from us does not define us. What we build from the wreckage does. She was not rescued. No hero descended with a sword to save her. She rescued herself, slowly, patiently, by choosing compassion when rage would have been easier. The myth does not pretend the abduction was acceptable. It does not romanticize captivity. It says this terrible thing happened, and then, and this is the miracle, she made it hers. Persephone's transformation is the myth's deepest treasure. Maiden to queen, victim to sovereign, flower child to ruler of the dead. Each step was her own. She did not become powerful by acquiring weapons or defeating monsters. She became powerful by sitting with suffering and choosing not to look away. That is a different kind of heroism, quieter, harder, the kind that doesn't make for exciting battle scenes but sustains entire worlds. The heroism of care. The duality is essential. Persephone is not spring or death. She is spring and death. The myth insists that these are not opposites. They are partners, each giving the other meaning. Without winter, spring is meaningless. Without grief, joy has no depth. Without the descent, there is no return. Persephone's myth is the oldest argument that darkness is necessary. Think of your own descents. The times you were pulled into darkness you didn't choose. Grief, loss, change, fear. And think of what you built there, in the dark, when no one was watching. Maybe you found strength you didn't know you had. Maybe you found compassion. Maybe you found a throne in the dark and sat on it and realized it fit. That is Persephone's gift to you tonight. Not a lesson, a recognition. You have already made this journey. You have already eaten the pomegranate. You are already more than one thing. The ancient Greeks did not worship Persephone out of fear. They worshipped her out of gratitude, for proving that the dark is not empty, that there is someone there, that you will not be alone. Spring always comes back. That is the promise. Not that winter won't arrive, it will. But that after the longest dark, after the deepest cold, something green will push through. It always does. The temples at Eleusis fell to ruins 15 centuries ago. The torchlit processions ended. The secret died with the last initiate. But the story refused to stop breathing. Dante placed Persephone in his Inferno. Milton echoed her in Paradise Lost. Shelley wrote her as freedom. Keats painted her in words so lush you could smell the pomegranate on the page. Bernini carved her in marble. Hade's fingers pressing into her thigh, her body twisting away. The stone captured what words sometimes cannot, the violence and the beauty inseparable. Every autumn, somewhere in the world, someone sees the first leaf fall and thinks, without knowing why, of a mother watching her daughter disappear into the ground. The myth lives in our instincts now. Persephone is in every story where someone descends into darkness and emerges changed. She is the blueprint. Dorothy in Oz, Alice Underground, every heroine who falls and rises. She is in the garden outside your window. Every seed that sleeps through winter and wakes in spring is performing her myth. The earth remembers what the mind forgets. She is in the pomegranate you might have eaten last autumn, its seeds bursting sweet and sharp against your teeth. Did you think of a queen choosing her throne? Perhaps not, but she was there. The Eleusinian secret may be lost forever, but perhaps it was never a single revelation. Perhaps the secret was the journey itself, the torches, the dark, the walking and the arriving. Tonight, you've walked that path. You followed Persephone from sunlight to shadow and back again. You carried torches through the dark. The mystery, if there is one, is yours now. Persephone's story will outlive us all. It will outlive our languages, our nations, our technologies. As long as seasons change and mothers love and seeds sleep in the dark, she endures. The meadow is quiet now. The flowers have closed for the night. Somewhere below, Persephone sits on her throne, watching over the sleeping dead. Somewhere above, Demeter watches the stars. The story is told. The torches are dimming. Let the ancient words settle around you like a blanket woven from 3,000 years of telling and retelling. You don't need to remember every detail. The myth will be here tomorrow, and the day after, and 1,000 years from now. It has waited this long, it can wait for you. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day sink through you into the mattress, and down through the floor, down through the earth, all the way to where the rivers run silver. Persephone watches over more than the dead. She watches over everyone passing through the dark, and sleep is just a small, safe crossing. She'll be here when you wake. The pomegranate seeds have all been counted. The seasons have all been named. There is nothing left to do now but close your eyes and let the ancient dark hold you gently. The meadow sleeps. The underworld rests. Even the gods close their eyes eventually. The only sound left is the earth turning slowly, slowly, carrying you toward morning. It always does. But that is tomorrow's story. Tonight, you rest. Good night, traveler. The queen of the dark is watching. The goddess of spring is waiting. And between them, the world holds you safe. Sleep now. The seeds are planted. The dark is kind. And morning will bring the flowers.